In this session, we're going to switch gears a bit. I'm going to move from a moderator to a presenter. And we're going to talk about, okay, so this is exciting stuff, these cognitive science principles, and we've highlighted sort of 4 general areas, and there are more, of course, than the ones that we've outlined. And I can tell you as one that has worked for a number of years with schools and lots of teachers that teachers are hungry for this kind of stuff. We recently had a session at the National Science Teachers Association, for example, 2 of them, where we brought the cognitive science people there, and the teachers had to pay, this is at the National Science Teachers Association, for a full day, and they did, and we were oversubscribed. They were waiting at the door. Everywhere you go, you'll see whether it's at the American, different professional organizations of teachers, they want this kind of stuff. They really want to know what can they do to improve learning for their kids. So with that, there was a question about, so can we take the application of these science curriculum and move them into the classroom using existing curricular materials in ways that can make a difference to kids' learning? Kind of a simple question. But the details of answering that question are pretty complex, because the question is, what principles? Well, we chose 4 of them, the ones that you highlighted, that we highlighted today, to try to push into the classroom. What existing curricular materials? We chose 2 kinds of curricular materials that are very popular. One has been previewed before as the Holt series, which is primarily a textbook series. It's used widely by Holt publishers, and the Philadelphia school system uses that for all of its students. At the other end of the spectrum is the NSF-sponsored full option science system, FOSS, goes by FOSS, which is inquiry-based, kit-based, and was developed by the Lawrence Hall of Science. And in fact, we have two of the folks that were responsible for its development, Larry Malone and Linda DeLucci, here today with us. And we thought that we wanted to get enough of an oomph in terms of the implementation that we we wanted to do about 1.5 years of intervention. This would be about 3 units or so, something of that nature, between either grades 7 and 8 or grades 6 and 7, something in that neighborhood. We chose the biological, earth science, and physical science representations. You'll see the names of the units there. Oops. There's another slide of the same information, just presented differently. See, I was trying to. Now, we did have some design constraints, which is that the modifications couldn't take up more time than a business-as-usual science unit, because if we wanted to see, hey, can this really make a difference, we couldn't have the extra time being the difference. We had to do it within the same confines. Also, we had to do it where the teachers were going to use it. In other words, the researchers wouldn't be teaching the unit, the teachers would be doing it. So we had to develop materials that would be usable for the teachers and would be perceived by the teachers as relatively, it would make sense from their point of view. And so it had to be seamless and integrated. Also, they had to be user-friendly, sort of off the bat. So what we did is, and this was a question, question about can cognitive science be profitably used in classrooms, that was posed in an RFP by IAS, and we decided to put together a team of people to try to respond to it. And that team of people turned out to be We were fortunate enough to be successful in the application, and it turned out to be the National Center for Cognition and Science Instruction, which is sponsoring this conference today. So the folks that we brought together to be on the science team were Chris Shun, Kalyani, where is she? Tim Noakes, who's not here, Nora Newcomb, and Jennifer Cromley, and last but not least, Chris Massey. Now, as you might see, all of these folks were from different traditions, and so the challenge was to bring them together, each working on four principles, and have them actually work on real live units collectively. We also, Andy Porter's shop, and he'll talk more about that in a little while, we had end-of-unit assessments that we constructed. He'll describe that, that we got from NAEP and other state assessment items that were aligned to each unit in a very careful way, plus 8th grade assessments. Now, the problem, though, here is, as you might suspect, is let's say you did those units and you got an effect, and somebody says, well, perhaps it wasn't the cognitive science that did it. Maybe it was just that the teachers got more content. Because after all, these are middle school teachers, they're usually not secondary certified, and maybe what you did is you gave them more content. Certainly, there is a strong belief, and I'm one of them, I mean, it's sort of intuitive that, gee, if you have more content, you should be a better teacher. So, in addition to a control group, we thought that we needed a content-only control group, where, in fact, they wouldn't get any pedagogy. It was like a mini graduate course in the science that they were actually teaching at the moment. And the content and the cog-sci had a match in terms of the amount of professional development hours we gave teachers. We couldn't favor one versus the other. So also, because we were doing these in units, we felt it was necessary to randomize at the school level. So here was our study design logic, that we would collect baseline information. We would have 3 interventions, or 3 arms, a control, a content arm, and the cognitive science plus content PD. And why we say content PD is that it's very hard to, it's almost impossible, I think it's interwoven, to introduce a cognitive science principle and not talk about content. So we had 3 arms, and the logic model is that they would, we would provide modifications of these units, so professional development, how to do them, content, professional development, a business as usual group. The theory being they would teach the unit, and that should improve student learning outcomes. And as you all know, the best way to show causality is the gold standard is randomized controlled trial. So Andy can talk about the hierarchical linear model that he used to do this, but we had a randomized by school. Strongest evidence. So, no problem. All right, we just need 180 schools. Because we need 90 for the FOSS, and we need 90 for the hold, and 30 in each group. All right? So you have the control, the content, and the cog-sci. So, fortunately, we were able to get Philadelphia, which has a bundle of schools that were that has about 92 schools, and we did get Pittsburgh. And as Chris Massey, was it Chris that talked about it? Nora. FOSS was a challenge. Fortunately, we were able to find sites in Tucson and in Phoenix. As you may know, Phoenix is not a single school district. It's a conglomeration of many. So we had 65 schools in Phoenix. And if there was any doubt about before I had about where the geography of Arizona was, from Philadelphia, We quickly found out how far that was, but we managed to actually do that site. In terms of the number of teachers, we had about 500 teachers in the study. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ins and outs of what happened with those teachers, but that's kind of the breakdown that we had. And so the National Center is a partnership of different groups. We have our CogSci people at Silk and at the LRDC in Pittsburgh and Penn. Research for Better Schools, which has been marvelous in all kinds of logistics and testing help. Of course, the Graduate School of Education at Penn on the analytics, and our organization, the 21st Century Partnership for STEM Education. We've been around for about 5 years, and we come out of a math-science partnership of the NSF, where we ran about, we managed about 125 schools and 13 institutes of higher education in a large targeted MSP, so that was kind of our area of expertise. And we have our staff that came on board to do that. And I'll just briefly tell you what our roles were, which was first to recruit the schools. Secondly, to design the professional development for the treatment arm and for the control arms. We have a lot of people, as you'll meet in a moment, with deep knowledge of very experienced teacher leaders. We had a process, probably about 100,000, I think, Deanna, of tests, which we couriered and mailed to the teachers and had couriers pick up. We did this 6 times altogether, in 6 different versions, by the way, which I won't talk about, but it was a massive task that she managed. We administered the teacher content test, did the surveys, enacted curriculum, collected 8th grade student level test data. Fortunately, we had people that we borrowed from or that left the Philadelphia school system that we grabbed, Bates, that helped us a lot in being able to get access to the data from Philadelphia. So that was our role in the 21st Century Partnership. And now what I'm going to do is turn it over to, of course, we also had to manage the teachers. Nancy Burns back there was did a marvelous job of contacting every teacher, keeping and knows the ins and outs of probably every teacher in the study. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Shunn, who's going to give you a little further development of. I have 8 minutes left.
No, that's it.
Hey, I think I did pretty good. All right, we'll have Q&A afterwards.